January 17th, 1945. Holzwehr, France. The earth trembled beneath the weight of artillery. Snow fell in thin, silent sheets over the frozen Vosges countryside, clinging to the shattered branches of leafless trees. On a ridge overlooking the town, a young man, barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, knelt behind a frozen log, his breath forming ghosts in the bitter cold. His name was Audie Murphy. He was 20 years old. The German army was 300 yards away, and they were coming for him. He had been told many times before that he was too small for war, too thin, too young, too fragile for the machinery of violence that had consumed Europe. The recruiting officers had turned him away more than once, shaking their heads as if his determination were childish fantasy. But Murphy had lied about his age, gained weight by eating everything he could find, and pestered every branch of service until the infantry finally, reluctantly, let him in. Now, on this frozen morning in Alsace, the boy they said was too short to fight stood alone between the advancing German forces and the remnants of his company. It is a strange and terrible thing to be dismissed by the world only to be called upon to save it. The Second World War had stretched on for more than 5 years. By early 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing, but it fought with the ferocity of a dying animal. In the frozen forests of France, American forces clashed with German battalions determined to hold every meter of soil. The Battle of the Colmar Pocket was one of the bitterest winter campaigns of the war, a grinding meat grinder of snow, blood, and steel. Audie Murphy's unit, Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, had been fighting for weeks without rest. They were exhausted, underfed, outnumbered, and on this particular morning they were about to be overrun. Murphy had already earned a reputation. The skinny farm boy from Texas had become one of the most decorated soldiers in his division. He had killed enemy soldiers at close range. He had led charges under fire. He had dragged wounded men from burning vehicles. His fellow soldiers no longer saw him as the frail kid who didn't belong. They saw something else, something fierce and unbreakable, forged in the furnace of combat. But even Murphy's commanders doubted what he could do against 6 German tanks and 250 infantry advancing through the snow. The Germans expected an easy victory. American lines were thin. Reinforcements were miles away. The weather made air support impossible. This was supposed to be a textbook assault. Armor leading, infantry following, resistance crushed under treads and bullets. The Wehrmacht soldiers advancing that morning believed they were fighting a broken enemy, boys far from home, clinging to frozen mud, waiting to surrender or die. They did not expect Audie Murphy. When the German tanks appeared through the mist, Murphy's company began to fall back. Officers shouted orders. Men scrambled for cover. The situation was clear. They would be encircled and annihilated if they stayed. Murphy ordered his men to withdraw into the forest, to regroup, to survive, but someone had to stay behind and slow the enemy advance. Someone had to buy time. Murphy climbed onto a burning M10 tank destroyer that had been hit minutes earlier. Flames licked at its sides. Fuel and ammunition cooked inside, threatening to explode at any second. The machine gun mounted on top, a .50 caliber Browning, was still intact. Murphy grabbed it, swung it toward the advancing Germans, and opened fire. The sound was apocalyptic. The heavy machine gun roared like thunder, each round tearing through the winter air, with brutal precision. German soldiers fell in rows. Officers screamed orders that were lost in the noise. The tanks slowed, confused, searching for the source of the devastating fire. Murphy did not stop. He fired in short, controlled bursts, methodical and cold, as if the flames beneath him and the bullets around him did not exist. For 1 full hour he held that position, alone, on fire, surrounded. The Germans tried everything. They directed tank fire at the burning vehicle. Shells exploded around him, showering him with frozen dirt and shrapnel. Infantry squads attempted to flank him, crawling through ditches and hedgerows. Murphy cut them down. He called in artillery strikes on his own position, directing American howitzers to rain shells within 50 yards of where he stood, obliterating German formations before they could reach him. When the radio operator on the other end asked if he was sure about the coordinates, Murphy shouted back, "If you don't fire, we're all dead. Fire now!" They fired. The earth erupted in fire and steel. German soldiers were hurled into the air like broken dolls. Tanks reversed, their crews blinded and panicked. The advance faltered, then stopped. Murphy kept firing. His hands were burned, his face was blackened with soot. His legs were bleeding from shrapnel wounds he hadn't noticed. The tank beneath him could explode at any moment. He did not move. By the time his ammunition ran out, 50 German soldiers lay dead in the snow. Another 30 were wounded. The tanks had retreated. The infantry had scattered. The assault was broken. Murphy climbed down from the burning tank, walked back to his men, and collapsed. The number was later confirmed by field reports and German records. Audie Murphy had killed or wounded approximately 84 enemy soldiers in one engagement, alone, on a burning vehicle, for an hour. When his superiors heard the report, they thought it was a mistake. When they confirmed it, they were silent. The story spread through the American lines like wildfire. The boy who was too short to fight had stopped an entire battalion. The soldier the army didn't want had become the most lethal force on the battlefield. And it was not just the numbers that mattered, it was what those numbers represented. To the Germans, Murphy was a ghost, a phantom that should not have existed. Their intelligence reports said American soldiers were soft, undisciplined, spoiled by wealth and democracy. They were supposed to break under pressure, to flee when faced with real warriors. Instead, they found a farm boy from Texas who fought like the angel of death. It shattered their illusions. It made them question everything they had been told. To the Americans, Murphy became something else, proof. Proof that courage was not measured in height. Proof that strength came from the heart, not the body. Proof that even the smallest, poorest, most overlooked boy from the hardest corner of the Republic could stand against the darkness and win. Audie Murphy's rifle became his symbol. Not the machine gun he used that day, but the standard-issue M1 Garand he carried into every battle. It was an ordinary weapon, mass-produced in American factories, handed to millions of soldiers, but in Murphy's hands it was an instrument of precision and will. He cleaned it every night, even when he was exhausted. He knew every part of it, every sound it made, every way it could fail. It was the tool of his trade, the extension of his resolve. That rifle represented something larger. It represented the factories of Detroit and Pittsburgh, the assembly lines run by women and old men while their sons fought overseas. It represented the industrial might of a nation that could produce 15 million rifles, 80,000 tanks, 300,000 aircraft, and still have enough steel left over to build bridges and schools. The Germans had superior tanks, the Japanese had fanatic devotion, but America had abundance. And abundance, it turned out, was a kind of power all its own. Murphy did not philosophize about this. He was a soldier, not a scholar. But he understood it in his bones. Every time a supply convoy arrived with hot food, fresh ammunition, and mail from home, he saw it. Every time a wounded man was evacuated by air, treated in a field hospital with real doctors and real medicine, he saw it. Every time reinforcements arrived, endless waves of young men from every state, every background, every creed, he saw it. The Germans and Japanese fought for empires. America fought for something harder to define and impossible to destroy, the idea that every person, no matter how small or poor or forgotten, mattered. Murphy survived the war. He returned home to a hero's welcome, the most decorated soldier in American history. 33 awards and decorations, including the Medal of Honor. Hollywood made him a star. He wrote a memoir. He smiled for cameras and shook hands with presidents. But the war never left him. He spoke rarely of what he had done. When reporters asked him how he felt standing on that burning tank, facing death alone, he said only, "I did what I had to do." When they asked if he was afraid, he admitted that he was, terrified every single day. Fear, he explained, was not the opposite of courage. Fear was the proof that courage was real. Years later, Murphy became an advocate for soldiers suffering from what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder. He spoke openly about his nightmares, his flashbacks, his inability to sleep without a loaded pistol under his pillow. He fought for veterans' rights with the same ferocity he had brought to the battlefield. The boy who was too short to fight became the man who refused to let his brothers be forgotten. There is a photograph of Audie Murphy taken in 1945, shortly after the battle at Holtzwihr. He stands in his uniform, thin and pale, his eyes staring past the camera into some unseen distance. He looks older than 20. He looks tired. He looks like a man who has seen the worst of humanity and chosen, despite everything, to remain human. That photograph tells the story better than any battle report. It shows what war costs, it shows what it takes from the young and gives to history, and it shows something else, something the totalitarian powers of the world could never understand. Democracy does not create supermen, it does not forge perfect soldiers or unbreakable warriors. What it creates are ordinary people, farmers' sons and factory workers' daughters, who, when the moment demands it, become extraordinary. Not because they are told to, not because they are programmed or indoctrinated or enslaved, but because they choose to be. Audie Murphy was too short for the front lines, too poor, too young, too much of everything the world said didn't matter. But on a frozen ridge in France, surrounded by fire and death, he proved that the world was wrong. And in doing so, he became proof of something larger, that the measure of a man is not his height, his wealth, or his birthright. The measure of a man is what he does when everything is against him, when retreat is easy and courage is hard, when the only thing standing between darkness and light is his own fragile, stubborn, unbreakable will. 84 enemies fell that day. One small man stood. And the world learned, once again, that freedom fights back.